Tractate Bava Metzia, page 99. I would like to dedicate the shiur today for the refuah shlema of the Rosh Hashiva, Harav Aharon Yuda Lei ben Gittel Fega, Rav Steinman. So one of many stories about the Rosh Hashiva in Bnei Brak in Israel. I have the privilege to know him and ask him in the past. One time one of his attendants, people who take him to places, he's now more than 100 years old. So when he turned about 95, the guy who used to take him to different occasions, weddings and other things that people invited him, he said he wants to stop. And the fellow asked him why, and he said, I'm afraid that I'll grow up Amaretz, that I'll grow up someone who's not anymore a Torah scholar. Now think about it. This is a giant of the giant scholar who's the age of 95, afraid that if he's traveled from one simcha to another, he will grow up Amaretz. So the lesson is that we for sure need to learn up to the age of 95, like the Rosh Hashiva. But even when you reach that age, if you spend too much time doing all kind of other things instead of focus on study Torah, then eventually you can reach those point that the Rosh Hashiva was afraid of. And that's what we said yesterday. When we read the Torah, we said, Lekayem banu chachmei Yisrael, to have among us great wise people. So we pray that he should have a speedy recovery, speedily and soon. The subject we're going to discuss today, first and foremost, is the subject of Shoel, the borrower. I would like to use example in a way, in a practical way. Even in the Mishnah we talk about cow. The subject, it's the, let's say a car. One fellow, let's call him Abraham, he asked another fellow, let's call him Reuven, to borrow his car. Abraham said, I don't have a car, I need to go to New York City, I need to go, for example, for the family wedding, and I need a car. And Reuven said, if you go for the mitzvah, to partake of simcha, I'll give you the car. I don't want money, I don't want anything, I'll give you the car. You know what happens sometimes to people? How do you say it? You give a finger, they want the whole hand. So Abraham said to him, oh, thank you. Can you bring over to my house your car? Or can you send it with your driver? And I bring your driver back to you. And sure enough, Reuven said, fine. You go to do a mitzvah of simcha, I'll send my driver to you and you bring him back here. Unfortunately, guess what happened? On the way, the driver had an accident. And luckily, nothing happened to the driver, but the car is total lost. Now the question is, by halacha, we're not talking insurance, we talk pre-insurance era, but you can conceptualize the idea. The question is, who is responsible for that? And again, let's understand the scenario. Abraham, for example, lived in Annapolis, Maryland. Reuven, for example, lived in Silver Spring, close to DC. The distance between the two, it's approximately 45 minutes drive, okay? Abraham called Reuven and asked him to borrow his car. Borrow meaning he's not renting it and pay rent, he's borrowing the car, okay? So in a way, Reuven does a huge favor to Abraham by letting him use his car. In addition, while they converse, Abraham asked Reuven to send his driver with the car from Silver Spring to Annapolis, and then he will bring the drivers back. While the driver drove from Silver Spring to Annapolis, he was involved in collision, in car accident. So now the car is total loss, nothing happened to the driver, and the question is, who needs to pay the damage? And if you go deeper, the question is, when exactly the beginning of the using that borrowing item? Matai megia zman ha'ash'ala. When exactly is the proper time of using the borrowing item? So the Mishnah gives us a klal, a general rule. It's all depend upon what's the reason Reuven sent his driver to Abraham. Who is the one who asked for that? Is that Abraham asked Reuven to do it for him, or Reuven initiated that? So let's zoom in the Mishnah, page 98b, 9 lines from the bottom of the page. Mishnah hasho'el et hapara. If someone, let's say we just use a name, so we said Reuven borrowed a cow. So now we use just name, Abraham borrowed a cow from Reuven. So Abraham borrowed a cow and the lender, which is Reuven, ושילחה ביד בנו, ביד עבדו, ביד שלוחו, ביד בנו, ביד עבדו, ביד שלוחו של שואל ומטר. So he basically, Reuven sent the cow by his son, his servant, his agent, etc. And unfortunately, while he transferred, the cow from Silver Spring, for example, to Annapolis, the cow died. Yes?
I got a question, Rabbi. And it's kind of complicated. It seems like a both of them is responsible, but the car never got to the other guy that was borrowing it. So in a way, it seemed like the person who was sending it to him wound up paying for everything by himself.
Okay, so what you're saying is, it's a good point, but let's think together how the system, how the logical system works. The Mishnah used the term of cow. I use the term of car. I just want to make it more visible, more understanding. So for those who come just now, we use example of, I'm just using name, Abraham and Reuven. Abraham live in Annapolis, Reuven live in Silver Spring. And Abraham asked Reuven to borrow his car. He needs to go to a simcha, to a wedding in New York. And Reuven said, fine, no charge, take my car. Then Abraham asked him to send his driver from Silver Spring to Annapolis to bring over the car. And unfortunately, on the way from Silver Spring to Annapolis, the driver was involved in collision and the car is totally lost. Nothing happened to the driver. So we ask, who is responsible for the damage? So I'm using that as a springboard because the Mishnah used the para, the cow, but the concept is the same concept. So we just read the Mishnah that said that one who borrowed a cow and the lender sent it to the borrower by the hand of all kind of example, his son, his servant, his agent, the borrower's son, the borrower's servant, the agent of the borrower, and unfortunately the cow died on the way to the borrower. So this, the first scenario said, as Gilbert mentioned, the borrower is exempt. Why? The idea is, the rabbis explain, because the period of the borrowing begins only when once the cow reaches the domain of the borrower. So that's one concept. Is based on that we learn, I hope you recall, in Tractate Bava Kamma, page 104, We learn that the responsibility is only עד שתיכנס לרשותו, until they, for example, in this case, the animal entered to the borrower's domain. But the Mishnah continue and see, what?
Borrowing,
Yeah,
not renting.
not renting. And we're not talking insurance. That's prior to those insurance. But you know what? Even you think about insurance, there is a concept of honesty when you're dealing with them, right? So you have to, in a way, take responsibility if...
When the guy made the decision that, he wanted to give it to him because it was for the purpose of a mitzvah, I mean, essentially, he accepted responsibility as a lender then, and not as a renter, not renting it out. So, I mean, he accepted that responsibility by doing that, right? I mean,
So far so good, but let's talk about the opposite situation. אמר לו השואל, שלחה לי ביד בני, ביד עבדי, ביד שלוחי, או ביד בנך, ביד עבדך, ביד שלוחיך. If the opposite way, right? Reuven, who live in Silver Spring, said to Abraham, who live in Annapolis, you know what? You sent me, your son, your maid, your whatever it is, somebody, to come over and pick it up, right? או שאמר לו המשאיל, הריני משלחך לך ביד בני, ביד עבדי, ביד שלוחי, או ביד בנך, ביד עבדך, ביד שלוחך. So here, the initiation is what? The other side, the borrower said to the lender, sent it to me by the hand of my son, etc. Or the second scenario, we said where the lender said explicitly to the borrower, I am sending it to you by the hand of my son, or by the hand of my servant, by the hand of my agent, by etc. By the hand of you son, you servant, the hand of your agent. And the borrower said to him, send it as you have said. So now, ושילחה ומתה, חייב. Here we said as what? The borrower is liable to pay. The borrower is liable to pay the lender the value of the cow. Why? So you have in Bava Kamma 104 Rashi that explain to us that that's the idea of shaliach. That's the Shita Mekubetzet bringing the Ravid said it. The shaliach meaning you have an agent that does thing for you. They said since the borrower agreed to the cows being brought to him by the hand of another, so what happened now? He bears liability for the moment the cow, or by us is the car, right, was transferred into that person's possessions. That's called in halacha din zchiyah. Chazon Ish have mahalach here, right? Because the moment you have zikayon, remember when we talk, for example, in Gitin, so you have shaliach that represent her lekabbalah, to receive. And if that's the case, the moment the shaliach received the get, she's already divorced. You remember those cases? So in that case, here, since you sent another person, so the moment that that entity, for example, the cow or the car, right, was transferred to that person's possessions, that basically transfer or hold the liability of the borrower for all the consequences. So up to this point, the Mishnah explained to us when exactly the responsibility took place, which is the moment that the borrower received it. But now the Mishnah go in a little different angle and said, "V'chen b'sha'a shemachazira." So also this halacha applies the time the borrower returns it to the lender. Okay, so when exactly the liability absolves? When it's exactly the over of the liability? So they said only the time that the cow is transferred to the lender himself, or to someone who is the lender agent, then you transfer the liability, right? So since David, what?
Depends who the shaliach is. If you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
your own shaliach, then you're still responsible till you hand it over. And if he sends his shaliach, then it's when you hand it to the shaliach.
Right. So the truth is, the Ran and Mukhe Yosef, you just mentioned earlier the renting or leasing situations. So is the Ma'alach, if you read the Ran, is just try to compare to nowadays. If you're renting a car, right, in practical way, from a company, and the company, let's say Enterprise on West Street, sends someone to pick it up, you call them and you say the car is ready. And between your domain to their rental place something happened, right? It's no longer your responsibility, right? Because the moment the agent receives it, that's the end of your liability, right?
Yes.
They send their agent, it's over, right? Even it can happen that the agent take you with them and you sign all the final papers there. But the moment the agent come to pick up the car, right?
Agreed.
That's the over. Okay, page 99. Now, page 99, the Mishnah tells us in the middle statement that if the borrower said to the lender that he should send the car with an agent and something happened in the middle of the road, the borrower holds responsibility, because the moment that that agent enter to that domain, then the borrower is responsible. So part of that list was the servant of the lender. So what does that mean, the servant of the lender? In those days, it used to have a Canaanite servant. So the Gemara said, Beyad Avdo, if he sent, meaning Reuven sent by his servant, who is a Canaanite servant, Chayav, he is liable. It's basically Yad Eved ke Yad Rabo. Do you remember, we studied in Tractate Kiddushin, that when someone, let's say Reuven, sent John, his servant, right? The servant is basically a Reuven himself in that sense. There's no difference between the owner and the servant, because servant is part of the owner's property. So it's in that sense, by framework of halacha, is the same as the owner himself brought it there. You see it in many places in the Talmud, that the servant is considered by framework of halacha as part of the owner domain. So they explain, Amar Shmuel be'eved ivri de lo kanegel gufeino. You know, the Mishnah speaks about those cases in those days that you have, for example, someone who stole money and he cannot pay the amount that he owes, so he, either by the Bet Din or himself, sold himself as a servant, and therefore that money that he earns will be paid to whoever he owes, right? Or others, some press for fund situations. So the moment the person owns a Hebrew servant, you have a different framework of halacha. You have to treat him in different ways. So they said, Shmuel said, how our Mishnah speaks about a Hebrew servant, that he is owned, but it's not full ownership, the same as Canaanite servant, by the lender, the lokanele gufe, that the owner does not acquire his person. So the property of that servant possession is not considered to be in his master possessions. Another option, Rav Amar, afilu teima be'eved knaani, even you tell me that that example the Mishnah used applies to what? To Canaanite servant. And what we said earlier, remember we mentioned the Gemarrah in Kiddushin, or Gemarrah in Psachim 87, Kiddushin is 23b, and other places that Yad Eved ki Yad Rabo, that the hand of the servant is the same as its master. So he said, Na'asa ke'omer lo hakisha b'makel vehi tavo. So when someone said, just use your stick, hit the cow with the stick, and it will come by itself to me. So what happened? The moment you give such an instruction, so no matter what the result, if the animal goes to a public domain or he sends someone to guard the animal on the way, the moment something happens, the borrower is responsible. Why? Because by doing such a thing, it's considering in part an action. The Ritva argued and said that's called din arev. Arev is like almost like a co-signer. So the co-signer is not the one who acquired the transactions, if it's a loan or any other commitment, but he is the co-signer. He is basically the one who's have a second-hand but direct responsibility for the contract. So it's like Reuven said to Shimon, lend money to Levi and I'll guarantee, right? So the moment you said so, you are part of that. You are bearing in part, you can call it second responsibility, right? But if something happened, Levi did not pay, you are basically the co-signer, right? So that's the same thing here when he stick the animal with his stick. So the same here, he hold the responsibility. So here we have, according to Ritva, it's a beautiful Ritva in our Sugya, by the way. They say that usually the co-signer is not responsible, at least not direct responsibility. Here you see it. And the second chidush is even is sent by a servant that's supposed to watch over the animal, but he still hold this chiyuv, this responsibility of arev. Tosfot bring a very big chidush. Tosfot said when we use the term yad eved ki yad rabo, meaning the hand of the servant is the strange hand of the owner, since the servant is part of the owner's possession. So he said that apply only when the servant brings over the cow, but if he also borrowed the service of the servant, so then basically the servant is in a way have the framework of the responsibility as the cow. In a sense, he holds responsibilities for him. So as far as the holding ownership is with limitation, that limitation not existed when he also in addition ran the service of the servant. Right? That's the chidush of Tosfot. So why? Because then you cannot call it yad eved ki yad rabo. Tosfot call it ki yad behemto, that you treat it the same as you're responsible for the animal. So meitivei hashoel hapara veshilcha lo biyad bno. If one borrows a cow and the agreement of the borrower, the lender sends it to him by the hand of his son, as we learn in the Mishnah, by ayat shlucho chayav. He's sent by his agent and he dies on the way, so the borrower is liable. Beyad avdo patu. If the lender sent it by the hand of his servant, so the borrower is exempt. So what you see basically a contradiction between what we said in the Mishnah and here. Why? Because the Mishnah said that he's chayav, that he's liable. Bishlama li Shmuel. If you go by the view of Shmuel, so matnitin be'eved ivri. You remember Shmuel just said that the Mishnah speaks about the Hebrew servant, which is a total different framework of responsibility and connection between the service of the servant and the owner. Braita be'eved Knaani, and you can say that, oh, the quote we brought in this Braita is a total different case because it's a framework of halacha of Knaanite servant. Ela Rav Kashya, but according to Rav that maintained that what? The Mishnah speaks about the Knaanite slave. So therefore, the problem is it's a contradiction, because here we say that he is exempt, And early said that he's responsible. אמר לחברותיהם הנעשה כאמר לי, אמר לי, הקישה במקל ויתבוא. The same way, the same mindset that he said, hit the cow with the stick, and then it will come to it its owner. דאיתמר, השלני פרתך, אמר לו ביד מי? Someone said, I want to borrow a cow. And he said, with whom? Meaning, here, ברחל בתך הקטנה, here he gives him the specification. ואמר לו, הקישה במקל ותבוא. He said to him, that's the way I wanted. I want to hit with the stick and come. So he said, אמר רב נחמן רבא בר רב הוא אמר רב, כיוון שיצא מרשות משיל, ומת החייב. So since the shoel, the borrower said it in a very lucid way, so the moment the cow left the domain of the lender and died, the borrower is liable. You see that the spelling out the specifications makes it different. That's the concept we learned in several weeks ago when Yaakov, remember that? He said to Lavan, Berachel bitcha aktana. You know that this is your daughter Rachel and your daughter and the youngest one. So even Lavan cheated him, but still Yaakov at least spelled it out in a very clear way. Neima mesayali. So that's the bring a proof to that point. השילני את פרתך ואמר לי ביד מי, ואמר לי הקישה במקל ויתבוא, כיוון שיצאת מרשות משיל ומת החייב. So the moment that it's departed from the domain of the lender, he is responsible. That's basically saying that the moment it was the hakasha, the moment that he used the stick, that's basically makes a difference. Because the borrower asks to do it, and the moment the lender did follow the borrower request and use the stick, and the animal moved to a public domain, that's basically transfer the ownership of and the liability to the borrower for all the happening in during the journey. So the Gemarrah rejected and said, Amar Rav Ashi, you cannot prove that to the view of Rav. Meaning, Rashi explained, you know those train houses? You know what is a train? You go to a train. What? You go to a train, right? So you go to one, and then you need to go to for example, the cafeteria, right? So you walk in a train, you need to pass 1 or 2 or 3, right? What is called?
Passenger cars?
Passengers' cars, until you reach the cafeteria, right? So that's in the land, in the properties business, it happens that in order to reach a yard of Mr. B, you need to go to the yard of Mr. A. So it's basically you have to go through that in order to make it happen. So here it said, when the borrower is the throughway, it's in between to the lender, so he's forced to go by that way. I call it train, passenger train, right? You have to go that. The chimesh shalcha, that when he sent his cow that direction, vadai lehatam azla. So for sure, the cow goes there. So the borrower is willing to accept liability for the moment that the lender sent it, because there's no other way the cow can go anywhere else. So not everyone goes that direction. That's the way I explained to you is Rashi. The Ritva said that no, as long as the cow is in the domain of the lender, the borrower is not responsible. Here, the Ritva said that it has to speak about Shetach Hefker. Shetach Hefker in a very simple and short way, that's the Malach of the Ritva, which is fascinating Chidush. He said, let's use name. Let's say the borrower, his name is Reuven, and the lender, his name is Abraham. So Abraham have a yard where the cow, and according to the Ritva, it is true that the next step is Reuven, but in between the domain of Reuven's yard and Abraham's yard, it's some, in a way, short in between, that it's ownerless domain. So therefore you have a gray area between the two. In one hand, you know that eventually the animal will go to him, but here we have a certain area that neither one of the two, neither the lender nor the borrower, have legal attachment to that domain. And since the animal need to pass through that, if something happened beyond the control of the borrower, right, the borrower is still responsible for her, because he asked the lender to send the animal, and even it's clear that the animal ends up by his domain, but since it's a domain that not belong to anyone, you may think that that's free him from responsibility, and the answer is not. That's the chidush of the Ritva, right? Yachei maile memra lo tzricha deika gaziata. You have to say that here the chidush is that they are corners. Corners mean animals was hiding there, right? So even in that case is a chidush that the borrower, if he used the stick, he's responsible. That is relied on that assumption that the cow will nevertheless will come to him. So therefore, the moment that he accepts that responsibility, also accept the liability. Now we talk about similar case of inyanei hash'ala, the law of borrowing. Someone who borrows an axe from another fellow, bikabo kna'o. He took that tool and he chopped wood with that tool. So that moment he basically by halacha acquires it, meaning he's responsible, right? Lo bikabo lo kna'o. But as long as he did not chop wood with that, he's not acquired. Lemai, ilema lo nasim. What do you mean by that? If you talk about the liability for unavoidable mishab, right? So they said Maishna parade mishat sheila. So what's the difference between this and the cow? The Ritva said that the moment the agent take it, even he didn't use it, it's already hold the responsibility, as the Mishnah said. Ela lachazara. Remember the last clause of the Mishnah is talk about returning the item. Bikabo lo matzeh hadar b'sha'il, lo bikabo matzeh b'hadar sha'il. So here Rav Huna hold that when it's come to the law of borrowers, kinyan meshicha, which means the pulling is not apply when it's shomrim. So Rav Huna basically, according to Ritva, hold the same as Rav Yochanan. Remember we learned of Yochanan 47b that the only idea of pulling kinyan meshicha is only rabbinic enactment, and he also hold that applies not to have kinyan aguf, or only kinyan aguf, but not kinyan peirot. So that's and the Ritva also said that he is responsible, the borrower, for anything for the moment he pull it. Someone who is basically lend a axe that belongs to hekdesh, which is that is a consecrated item, and he did it by mistake. Ma'al, lefi tovat hana'ah shebo, he basically misused it. Why? Because you have here a financial advantage. V'chaveiro mutar levakeah bo lechatchila. But the other person, which is the borrower, is permitted to chop wood, even lechatchila ve'ilav kna'o. If you go by the Rav Huna that said that does not acquire amay ma'al, why you said that he's follow the law of misused? V'amay chaveiro mutar levakeah bo lechatchila nehadrei velo nikneye velo limol. So she should return it, and that's it. The fligad Rabbi Lazar, Ramar Rabbi Lazar, k'derech shtiknu b'mshicha belkochot, kach tiknu b'mshicha b'shomrim. Rabbi Lazar hold the same way the Sage Institute that the buyer acquire an item by pulling. The same way applies to what? They institute the bellies, the guardians, by pulling. תנא מאחר כשם שתקנו משיכה בלקוחות, כך תקנו משיכה בשומרים. וכשם page 99, שקרקע נקנית בכסף ובשטר ובחזקה, כך שכירות נקנה בכסף ובשטר ובחזקה. Remember we learned in Tractate Kiddushin, page 26, that when he's speaking about acquiring of land, so land is acquired either by the buyer giving money to the seller giving you have a bill of sale, or by buyer performing an act of taking possession. That's the kinyan. The same way applies to what? To renting or leasing. So they said, schirut maya bidtei. So why is the mention connection to act of acquisition that are effective with regard to land? So Rav Chizda schirut karka, talk about a rental of land. So it means that when we speak about land rental, it can be in one of the three ways. The same way as karka niknet, the regular matter of sale, so the same apply if he said in a document, my house is renting to you, or my house is leased to you, or he made the kinyan chazaka, that's basically cause the deal to be sealed and they cannot back out. Amar Shmuel Hayman de Gazil Chavitza de Chamre. Here we talk about someone who robs another a cake. Those days, Ve'id b'chamishin tmari. It's they have 50 dates. Most probably it was a type of food they used in those days. Agav adam is damdam b'chamishim nakechada. So they sold it for 49. Chada chada is damdam b'chamishim. But if you split it and sell it in the pieces, like you take a huge cake, right? And you make it in a date individuals, and you split it by each individual, so therefore you receive one pruta for each date. So it means if you collectively, if you buy the entire one, so it's cost you 49. It's like, I'm using it just for example, you buy a large pizza, right? I do it constantly for my grandkids, right? So you buy a large pizza, there is one price. I'm just using numbers, $10, right? $15. But if you buy a slice, it's a different price, right? So here, if you're collecting all the slices, it's a 50. If you buy the pie, it's 49, right? להדיוט משלם 50 נקי חדה. להקדש משלם 50 וחומשה. But if it's from something that is consecrated, we treat it in a different way, because there is addition that the Torah said in Leviticus chapter 5, that we impose another payment of 1/5, because that's called misuse unintentionally, but something that is consecrated, and therefore he needs to pay additional the principal and 20%. He also needs to bring a misuse offering. So later the Gemarrah explained the difference between someone who stole from a regular person versus stole from something that is consecrated, like for example religious institution. מה שאין כן במזיק זה לא משלם חומשה. דמרמר ואיש כי יאכל קודש, פרט למזיק. You don't deal with someone causing damage, the same requirement. מה תקיף לרבי בבר הבאה, להדיו, תמיים משלם 50 לכחדה, נאמר לאנה חדה חדה אבא מזבדין עלו. You can sell it by individual. So he explained, אמר אבונה ברי דרב יהושע, שמין ביצאה באותה שדה תנן. So that's basically the Gemarrah in Bava Kamma page 55b. The Gemarrah over there speaks about someone who sent an animal that entered to another fellow's field and ate a portion from that field. So you don't impose upon the owner of that animal to pay the way that part sell individually, but you estimated how much is the evaluation of that estate compared to the entire estate before it was eaten and now afterward. That applied to a general statement, but when it's come to Hekdesh, something consecrated, we don't use that leniency. I would like to share with you a vignette from a book called Divrei Geonim, translated from Hebrew. Someone gave a gold earring to a guardian to guard, and unfortunately the watchman was negligent and lost it. So the watchman properly offered to pay for half a pair of earnings, but the owner was dissatisfied with it. And he said, I have the other earning, and I want you to pay to replace what you lost. Although that is more than a half the value of the pair, it is the only way to recoup what I actually lost. So when that question represents to this great rabbi, the author of Divrei Geonim, he ruled that the watchman must pay for a replacement earning. And it's based on what we just studied. In his approbation for Divrei Geonim, Sholem Eshiv basically brought this Gemara. They said here we have the case of one who stole 50 dates. that stuck together that can be sold for 50 if they are sold separately, but only 49 if sold together, right? So the halacha is that he only pays 49 to the owner. However, if one accepted on himself to guard something, he is obligated to replace what was lost. So in this case, that means that he must pay for the replacement earning. למימרא דסבר שמואל, דין הדיוט לאו כדין גבוה דמי. So it means to say that Shmuel hold that when it's come to halacha, that the compensation for common person is not like something that it's a compensation for the Most High, which is, in this case, the temple treasury. So they said, if someone, that's in Tractate Bava, page 19b, if someone took a stone or a crossbeam from among those consecrated items that belongs to temple treasury, lo ma'al is not considering a misuse. If he gave it to another fellow, so he is under the framework of misuse, but his fellow not. He took something, you see, he saw something that belonged to the temple treasury, right? So what did he do? He took that part and he built part of his balcony or part of his house from that, for example, cross beam. He is not considering misuse the consecrated property until he reside underneath it in a value of at least one pruta. זאת אומרת, הדר בחצר חברו שלו בדעתו צריך לעלות לו שכר. So we said several times, we learned that sugya, that if someone who reside in another person's courtyard without his knowledge needs to pay him rent. Remember, I use always the example, you go to Reb Shimon, to Meiron in Israel. So there are certain weeks in the year that he's totally occupied. But a friend of mine who owns one of those apartments said to me that he caught people who all of a sudden start getting in his apartment there without permission, that they saw vacancies, they live there all of a sudden, right? So basically, according to that, they need to pay. הדר בדילמה מההדר, לא, מהיא הדר בכדרה ודמרה, וההקדש לא מידת כדיות מידת דמי. אומר רבה, I used to have more time. הנשקולי דתבר וחבית דחמרה לחנבנה. So he speak about those porters that they broke a shopkeeper's barrel of wine. ביום הדשוק גם מזדמה ב5, בשם מזדמה ב4. So you have a difference between the day that the market is active, that the amount itself is 5, versus the other days that is less activity in the market, is still only 4. If they return the barrel of wine the day that the market is active, so the compensation is the barrel of wine, which is which he could then sell for 5 dinars. But bishar yomei, if you want to pay the non-market days, right? Soon we elaborate on that. Just let me read at the end and then we explain. So a few things. Number one, the barzaniata. Rashi here used the word klomar. Lashon barza daishe belaz klomar. So there are several ideas of barzaniata. The simple idea that in the time of the Talmud, they used to have those barrels that made out of earthenware. And there is no hole in those barrels. So when that storekeeper comes to sell that wine, he needs to call for a special expert to place a special a faucet, a special handler or something to pull out the wine. That's one way. So the question is, that's extra expenses. But there's another idea of barzaniata is like promulgation, that tell people that that's now available, the wine is available for sale. But there is a disputation between the Chazon Ish and Ktsot HaChoshen. The Ktsot HaChoshen said that they basically garmulo, they cause him to have this barrel of wine worth 4. So therefore, there is a din that's called garmei. So according to the Ktsot HaChoshen, they need to pay only the 4 zuz for that barrel. According to Chazon Ish, he disputed, and he said you have to go by the real market value at the day of the market. So he said that day it's 5. Day before or day after, you cannot sell it by shovi amiti, by the full values. So therefore, they are responsible to pay the difference, which is 1 zuz, in order to complete the 2 5. So that's basically the Chazon Ish disagree with Ktsot HaChoshen.